What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Lights Out. I'm your host, Josh.
And I'm your co-host, Austin.
And our producer, Danny, is here as well.
What's up, guys?
Today, we got a absolutely insane case for you. This is the disappearance of the Jamison family. This case has so many theories. I mean, we could spend hours talking about all the theories around what happened to this family that disappeared on October 8th, 2009, and they left behind a bunch of just weird, eerie evidence. They left their dog locked in the car. There was cash left behind. And then there's a surveillance footage of them moving out of a house they believe was haunted. And they were seeing spirits, the occult's involved. I mean, this has just so many different elements to it, too.
So much. It's almost overwhelming, but we're gonna parse through it.
We are. And there's just so much information that we do know. And even after knowing this information, I'm pretty sure you're going to be left with more questions than answers, which is frustrating. But it'll make your mind just run wild with what happened to this family. I mean, this is one of Oklahoma's most haunting mysteries and one of the largest searches in Oklahoma history, which is absolutely crazy. I love Oklahoma. I actually lived there for a few years.
Did you?
Yeah. I lived there 4 or 5 years from, it was like preschool through first grade, I want to say.
Oh.
I lived in Oklahoma City. That's where all my tornado trauma came from, because severe weather out there is a regular thing for those folks. And of course, I've been following all of the crazy tornadoes they've been having just out there in Tornado Alley this year. And, my thoughts go out to everybody who's been impacted by these storms. It is no joke. I mean, it is scary. I still have dreams. Often when I have nightmares, it's of tornadoes.
Really?
And
Damn.
Just being a young kid and experiencing that severe weather is it's scary.
Yeah. I was lucky in Michigan. It was like some flooding every once in a while, but
yeah,
we rarely have tornadoes touching down. But strange enough, there were some tornadoes touching down this year.
Really?
Earlier.
Yeah. It seems like it's just getting more and more rampant, and in places where it normally doesn't happen. Luckily, here in Colorado, we don't really get too many tornadoes. If we do, they're relatively small and kind of out on the eastern plains. But for the most part, what's like the worst weather? We have some hail.
We get, baseball-sized hail. Yeah.
Or a blizzard once in a while.
Yeah.
But otherwise, not having to deal with that is really nice, because it's scary. I mean, nothing scares you more, especially as a kid, when hearing those sirens go off. And then there's no basements. So you're like,
oh, really?
You either have a storm shelter that you build, or you're getting in the bathroom. And so my parents would put us in the bathtub, and then they'd grab one of our twin mattresses and like put it over our heads.
Oh, shit.
And we just hang out in there during when they set off the alarms and everything. I mean, they're like close. There's one touching down close.
That sounds kind of fun.
It was kind of fun. Luckily, my
just
parents did make it fun, and they would make us like milkshakes and stuff. And then, we would just like read books in the bathtub drinking milkshakes.
Nice.
And, they did a good job of at least making it not as scary as it probably was.
Yeah.
My dad would be outside like looking at the clouds. My mom would be like, "Get Joe, get in here." So yeah. Anyways, but let's go ahead and dive into this Oklahoma mystery. And we're going to start with filling you in on the family, because the family dynamics here are very important and could really provide a lot of insight into what ultimately happened to them. So when Bobby Dale Jamison first met Sherilyn Leanne in 2002, they said it was love at first sight. They soon moved in together, and Sherilyn had a previous son from a prior relationship named Colton, who lived with them for a little while. About a year after she began dating Bobby, Sherilyn gave birth to their daughter, Madison Stormy Starr, on August 1st, 2003. Not long after that, though, things began to spiral. In November 2003, Bobby got into a car accident and severely injured his back, leaving him reliant on pain medication and unable to work. So obviously when that happens, it can be very tough to make ends meet. Even though they were struggling financially and they were relying upon disability and government assistance, Bobby and Sherilyn still got married in the summer of 2004, and they went out to Hot Springs, Arizona to celebrate. A few years later, in 2007, Sherilyn began struggling with her mental health, especially after her sister Marla, whom she was very close to, died in a freak accident. This is crazy, but she was stung by a bee on her tongue, which sent her into anaphylactic shock. That just sounds horrible, so tragic, God. Sherilyn's mother, Connie, later said, quote, "Marla was not just her sister, she was her best friend as well. Her death absolutely devastated Sherilyn, and she would spend days up in her room. She was very depressed and had to take medication. It obviously caused a lot of strain on the marriage. They argued, but then all couples do." Sherilyn lost her job soon after her sister's death, and she also stopped taking her antidepressants. She became a completely different person when she was off her medication. She acted extremely hateful and angry, which made it hard for anyone to help her, let alone want to be around her. And around this same time, Bobby's parents, Bobby Sr., also known as Bobby Dean, that's how we'll be referring to him throughout this episode, and Starlet, who went by Star, they were married for over 40 years, and they had decided to call it quits. Bobby was unfortunately caught in the middle. Ultimately, he was forced to get a legal protection order out against his father, who was allegedly making threats against his wife and daughter. In fact, Bobby Dean would have a lot of issues with many of his family members in regard to the divorce, leading several of them to file protective orders against him. In Bobby's protective order, he claimed that his father was involved with gangs, drugs, and prostitutes. He also claimed his father had threatened to kill his family twice, once in November 2008 when Bobby Dean tried to run him over with a car, and again in 2009. Bobby Dean had initially promised to sell his gas station and give Bobby half of the money, but after the divorce, he changed his mind and became so physically violent that it got to the point he attempted to run Bobby over with his car, but missed. Bobby stated to his lawyers, quote, "My father is a very dangerous man that thinks he's above the law." Bobby's protective order against his father was later dismissed, which we don't know exactly why, but seems concerning to say the least. With neither Bobby nor Sherilyn working in the addition of a new baby, they ran out of money and were unable to keep up with their house payments. Meanwhile, they reportedly settled a lawsuit against Bobby's father over the sale of his father's gas station. Some report $10,000 was awarded. Others report $32,000 was awarded. So, not exactly sure what the amount was, but it was likely one of those two. Around the same time in 2009, Madison also had an accident at school. She was hit in the face with a swing, and her 2 front teeth were knocked out. Bobby and Sherilyn immediately attempted to sue the school before they later opted to homeschool her. So one thing to note is that based on, what we know about Bobby and Sherilyn is that they seem to be kind of sue happy.
Yeah, they love litigation.
And I can see why, especially if you're financially struggling, why not take a shot every time you have a reason to. Again, like kids get hurt at school accidentally, so I don't know if that really warranted a lawsuit, but I see why they tried. Bobby's mother, Star, said, quote, "Sherilyn became incredibly angry and spiteful sometimes. She was jealous of my relationship with Madison and of my relationship with Bobby. By April 2009, Sherilyn had apparently banned Star from speaking on the phone with her son. Star also said, quote, "Bobby loved her and he suffered because of her moods. There was a time when I tried to get him and Madison to move away to Oklahoma City, but really, I would never have wanted to split them up. They had their difficulties, but they loved each other very much." In July, Sherilyn's son Colton from her previous relationship wanted to move out of the house to be with his dad. He felt like Sherilyn was unbearable to live with. In response, Sherilyn decided to take her ex-husband to court to sue for 40 months of child support back pay. And according to court records, he did in fact owe her about $30,000. And in the end, he still never paid her back. And in a weird twist of fate, the courts ultimately ruled that Sherilyn was now responsible for paying child support to her ex following her son's decision to move out. And to make matters worse, that same month, the family friend Kenneth Bellows moved in to help them with some odd jobs around the house following Bobby's back injury. Unfortunately, they had no idea that Kenneth wasn't just a handyman, but he was also a white supremacist. Sherilyn, who had allegedly had a Native American background, saw tensions quickly growing in the home. And it's unclear exactly what happened between them, but the arguments escalate to the point that Sherilyn shot a firearm at Kenneth's feet out of anger and possibly fear. After this, their relationship was permanently shattered and Kenneth found somewhere else to live, probably out of fear of being shot. Because one thing to note, and I don't know exactly sure if she started at this point in time, but Sherilyn carried a firearm on her.
Yep.
22 pistol. And so I'm guessing this was likely the weapon that she shot at him with.
Yeah.
But just something to note. Around the same time, Sherilyn's custody battle over Colton continued with her ex-husband. And during a hearing, 12-year-old Colton expressed that he wanted to live with his father, claiming that his mother had seemed, quote, very depressed and that she often, quote, acted strangely. And so he soon moved back in with his dad in July 2009. In September 2009, Sherilyn attempted to kill herself and had to be hospitalized. So just things are definitely spiraling and derailing, and it's very clear Sherilyn's mental health is very poor.
There is so much to unpack in that introduction there. Maybe we should do a little summary.
Yeah.
So we got Bobby is on disability. He also has a terrible relationship with his father, who used to work at the gas station. They sued him because his father sold it and he felt like he was owed something. They also tried to sue for Madison having her teeth injured. Though, as for the wife, Sherilyn, she is bipolar. She will shoot people on a whim, or shoot at people, I should say. And even her young son wanted to move out of the house because it was too tumultuous. So just a ton to unpack. Also, Sherilyn was banning Star from calling Bobby.
Right.
So seems like nobody's having a good relationship here with anyone. So yeah, kind of a lot to unpack right out of the gate. But
it's important to remember all of this as we get farther into this case, because there could have been more going on. Like, I think that's what we'll come back to, is that as much information as we just gave, there could be more that we just don't know because it's family drama and, you know, things going on within the family that just were never made public.
Exactly.
But I think just based off of those things, the family dynamics were in a very, very bad place.
Yes, agreed. And a lot of the quotes that we're pulling are obviously after the fact. You know, they're kind of talking about what happened because they're being interviewed. So even where they're saying, like Star's saying, oh, I wanted Bobby and his daughter to move to Oklahoma City, but I swear I didn't want to break up the family. It's like, well, that sounds like exactly what you're proposing here.
Exactly.
So on top of all that, you know, if the physical threats, the disability, the financial hardships, and mental health, if that wasn't enough, the Jamisons also believed they were fighting a spiritual battle inside their home. This is a fascinating element to this case.
It's kind of just out of left field.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't even
it's
get
just
it.
like, whoa, to pile on even more.
Yeah.
There's a spiritual battle going on with spirits in their home.
So basically, it became obvious there was something strange going on with the Jamisons when Bobby asked his pastor, Gary Brandon, a strange question out of the blue. He asked him, which this is crazy. He asked him, were certain bullets effective in spiritual warfare? He claimed his house was under attack from malevolent beings, and he claimed there were creatures from another world, and that he and his wife would frequently see them roosting on the roof of their house.
Now, just think about this for a second. This is so bizarre.
So bizarre.
What is he, like a silver bullet or something?
Yeah,
He's like, there's a werewolf or
have you also,
a vampire or something?
Have we ever heard of anybody successfully shooting a spiritual entity? No. Of course, that's an insane thing to ask.
I can only imagine what the pastor's face must have looked like when he got asked. Is like, huh?
What?
How about, here's the Bible, bro. Like,
yeah.
Like, put your guns down and start praying. Like,
honestly. Oh, man. So, and this wasn't just exclusive to Bobby. Sherilyn also maintained the same beliefs and claimed that 3 or 4 spirits were tormenting them. They had even got their names somehow. Among them were Michael and Emily, who had a young daughter, and they alleged that the girl's spirit frequently communicated with their daughter Madison. although the intentions of these spirits remained a mystery. Apparently, Bobby and Sherilyn wanted an exorcism of the house as well.
Which is not a common practice.
No.
Exorcisms are usually done
for people,
for individuals.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder if Madison is telling them this information about the spirits, kind of similar to our Wyra family case with Heidi, or this is just Sherilyn and Bobby communicating with the spirits, and they're just saying that they're communicating with Madison.
Yeah, true.
I'm like, what's going on here?
And like they're hearing something roosting on the rooftop where, are
we sure it's just not birds? Like,
they have like these massive trees. If you look at a picture of their property, they have massive trees around the house. It's like, it could honestly be the branches going into the roof, because you can kind of see it's all overgrown.
Or if they hear something, it's just the branches from the wind hitting.
Exactly, yeah.
It just makes me picture them sitting in their living room, and every time they hear a sound, they're like, guns drawn, like
Sherilyn's got her 22 out. Yeah.
It's like, which bullet should we use?
Grab the silver ones I got from the pastor. Yeah. It's wild.
Oh, God.
So, and this might just scream paranoia too.
Yeah. That's what it seems like.
Yeah. So, Pastor Brandon would later tell police that the last time the family reported seeing these spirits was on October 2nd. I believe they went missing 6 days later. And then he had tried to help them numerous times using, quote, natural remedies. And it's really not clear what that is.
Some holy water or something?
Yeah. He also claimed to see Bobby reading the Satanic Bible in an attempt to cast the entities from their home, which is interesting.
That's a very interesting thing to do.
Yeah.
Because
wouldn't it do the opposite if you're like, you more so conjure spirits than...
Well, and it also depends which Satanic Bible is he reading. I'm assuming he's reading the Anton LaVey's
That's what
version.
I assumed, yeah.
So maybe there's a chapter in there on that.
Yeah,
possibly.
maybe.
But yeah, very strange.
Yeah.
Why not the Holy Bible?
That would make more sense.
The pastor's like, here, read the Holy Bible. He's like, well, that didn't work, so I'm going to get the Satanic one. Yeah. Maybe if I speak in their own language, I'll be able to get them to leave.
But yeah, very odd. And Sherilyn also claimed that someone was poisoning their cats. Coincidentally, a cryptic message and graffiti was found on their shipping container, which eerily mentioned witches and the murdering of cats, which we'll get into a little bit later when we dive into the theories. By now, it's obvious the Jamisons struggled with many difficulties in their lives, and despite the challenges, those close to the couple insisted that their love endured, and that Madison was always the focal point in their lives. But they needed a change, and by October, the Jamisons were ready to get out of their, quote, haunted house and desperate to find a more affordable lifestyle. They decided to relocate to the middle of nowhere for a fresh start. They had already started the process of purchasing a plot of new land, and on October 8th, the entire family, including their dog Maisie, traveled to check out this new property for themselves.
So on October 8th, 2009, the Jamisons set their sights on a 40-acre plot in Red Oak nestled in the San Bois Mountains. It could be either pronounced either way, I think depending on who's pronouncing it.
Yeah, the technical pronunciation is San Bois, but some of the locals say San Bois.
I feel like I've heard it pronounced by Oklahomans as San Bois, mountains, but there's both. Which this is about 50 miles from their home in Eufaula. They couldn't wait to escape civilization, and they purchased a metal shipping container to be used as a temporary house or for storage on the new property. The couple made the unusual request that the real estate agent should stay behind for some unknown reason, which this is very curious, because obviously you need a real estate agent to make a land purchase usually. Not always, though. I know that you can do it sometimes without one as well.
Yeah. It's just odd that they told them to hang back.
Yeah.
For what reason? I don't get it.
Maybe they just want to go check it out without having I get that sometimes. If you ever dealt with some real estate agents, there's some real snakes out there.
Yeah, man. True.
I have some stories about real estate agents, but this real estate agent was like, yeah, no problem. I'll respect your wishes. I won't go out there and join you guys. So the family just ventured out there on their own. But after this, the Jamison family vanished. Their truck was later found near the area, not on the property. somewhat near the property, which this suggested that they got close to reaching their destination, but that's where the trail went cold. Just before the Jamisons left to see the property, security cameras caught them packing their truck with way too much stuff and moving almost like they were in a trance. They walked very slowly between the truck and the house, sometimes carrying things, sometimes not, but they didn't talk or look at each other once the entire time, as far as what we can see in this clip. Apparently, they also changed their clothes sometime between moving things. Unfortunately, only several seconds of this footage has been made available to the public, but we'll show you that now because this is definitely worth taking a look at. There's no sound for this, but for those listening, we'll kind of describe. So you can clearly see the pickup truck, all the doors are open, they're just kind of walking back and forth, looks like putting items into the truck, but it almost looks like these are just the cameras taking stills.
Yeah, it's low quality. It's like before we had Ring, it was just this low quality security footage, basically. It was like one frame per every 4 seconds or something.
So you can see there's Madison. It looks like there's Sherilyn in the yellow. Mm-hmm. And then looks like Bobby's wearing a white shirt.
The more credible thing was the officer who actually reviewed the footage. And he does say it is odd. They just go back and forth incessantly. I will say, though, not to be that guy, but I don't know. Have you ever loaded a car? It's like you're kind of just zoned out going to and from the house. I don't think it's anything like that out of the ordinary.
Yeah, people make a big deal about the trance state, but I don't know how you'd even discern that from this footage.
And honestly, if you saw footage of me loading my car, I'm in a fucking trance too. So
I moved a lot too, and you kind of just go in this robotic.
You're just locked in.
Like, oh, just get this over with.
Yeah.
And so you don't necessarily like talk to people either. It's not like you're like, oh, let's have a conversation in between each trip to the vehicle or to the truck. And so I don't know if there's that much to really take away from this that looks weird. And like changing clothes could just be like you spill something on you, you're sweaty.
Yeah. Plenty of explanations.
Lots of reasons why you might change clothes. So
yeah,
I don't really see why some people make a big deal out of the footage unless I'm missing something. But
yeah, people do get hung up on that.
This episode's brought to you by my CBD company, Higher Love Wellness. Right now, we are having a huge sale right now. We're talking discounts up to and sometimes over 50% off all of our Colorado-grown CBD products. We've got oils, we've got topicals, which are great for inflammation or just pain in general. I mean, these do wonders for you. It's all natural. It's derived from the hemp plant, so it's 100% legal. Can ship it to all 50 states and several countries as well. We also have some delicious CBD gummies, including some nighttime gummies as well. You're not going to find a better price on CBD products anywhere. This is really good stuff, high quality. I've been a part of the process and development of each of these products over the years, and I can assure you, you're going to absolutely love anything you get from Higher Love Wellness. So there's no code required. Just head over to higherlovewellness.com and take advantage. Things are selling out quickly. We're trying to clear space in the warehouse. So again, massive sale over at higherlovewellness.com. Check it out. But after they left, their GPS showed that they met up with a realtor for about 15 minutes before making the drive to the dirt road where they ultimately vanished from. The last confirmed sighting of the Jamisons was on October 9th, and at this period of time, the temperatures were hovering around 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Bobby Jamison, who's 44 years old, and his wife, Sherilyn, who is 40, and their 6-year-old daughter, Madison, would never be seen alive again after this point. Unfortunately, their limited contact with others meant their disappearance wasn't immediately noticed. It wouldn't be until their abandoned truck was discovered over a week later on October 16th at about 3 p.m., and that's when alarm bells started going off. Latimer County Police got a call from some concerned hunters in the San Boys Mountains, northwest of Red Oak, about a truck sitting on the side of a dead-end dirt road. It was near Quinta in Latimer County, and they believe it had been there for several hours, which was something out of the ordinary for that area. But authorities didn't think much of it since it was only a few hours. Because, maybe they went on a little hike or went to go check something out and, they were going to come back to the vehicle. But then the hunter called back, and this time they told police that according to locals, that truck had been there for days. At this point, detectives immediately headed over, and when they got there, they found the Jamison's family dog, Maisie, severely dehydrated and malnourished, still inside the vehicle, which is very odd. All the doors were locked as well, so they had to smash the windows open in order to save the dog. Once they got to her, they realized that she had eaten her own feces in order to survive. But I think the good thing is that she at least survived.
Yeah.
And the temperatures weren't high enough to kill the dog, which is good. Or cold enough, I guess, too.
Yeah, true.
To freeze her. But
she was a trooper.
Absolute trooper. It was clear that it was more than just a few days considering the condition that they found the dog in. And their first fear was that someone got lost in the wilderness, was possibly injured or starving, or both. To find some sort of identification, they began searching the truck, and that's when they found a few coats, 2 cell phones, Bobby's wallet, Sherilyn's purse, several maps, a GPS, and $32,000 in cash stuffed inside a bank bag.
More questions.
So, as a detective, you're like, okay, what the hell is going on here? All of their belongings are still in the vehicle, but they left their dog. So obviously, if they just left, they're planning to come back, because who would just leave all of their belongings if they weren't planning to come back to the vehicle?
Exactly.
So very strange. This is when they realized that it most likely wasn't one person missing, but perhaps an entire family. So police immediately dispatched 6 officers to search the surrounding area for any sign of the missing Jamison family. Unfortunately, it had been pouring rain the past week, and a lot of the evidence that could have helped with tracking their location was likely washed away in the storm. Detectives soon came up with a theory for why the cell phones had been left behind. Obviously, this is a rural area, so service was limited, if non-existent out there. So why bother bringing something if it doesn't work? And we're talking, early 2000s cell phones. So, yeah. And coverage was much different back then.
Yeah. This is flip phone era.
Although I would be a little bit suspicious about the GPS not being taken, because I assume it was like a Garmin GPS. You remember before our cell phones were, people would have like the little suction cup mount, and they'd have like their Garmin GPS or something like that to navigate with. So, and those usually either have local maps stored to like a memory card or something, or sometimes they have satellite connection. So if they were using that to get out to that area, then why not at least bring that with you? So
right,
if you do get lost, you can kind of like find your way back with that. But that was left behind as well. So very strange. Authorities also assumed that the $32,000 in cash found underneath the driver's seat might have been the money that was recently awarded after the lawsuit settlement. But that didn't explain why they had the cash with them. They ruled out a real estate transaction because they couldn't have done that without a realtor and other parties being present. Especially a cash deal, I feel like that would definitely require a realtor or somebody a notary or something in order to sign the deed over and stuff.
Also, I might be ignorant, but by 2008, if you're buying a cash property, isn't it still like you're wiring that money? You don't have it in like a lump sum physical cash.
No.
Right?
No. Yeah, very true. Most title companies are going to require wiring the money.
Right.
Usually is how you do that.
Because what is someone going to check all those bills that they're legitimate? Because they could, it's just.
I assume they're in hundreds, right?
Yeah.
I mean, 20s would be a crazy amount of cash. That'd be insane.
Very strange.
But yeah, that's a good point, because it could be fraudulent money. And so what are they going to pick up every bill and like look at it or like mark it?
Yeah, come on.
So I think that's a good point brought up by the investigators. But maybe they might have taken it in the car because they were worried that Bobby Dean, Bobby's father, would steal it when they were gone. Investigators figured Bobby would have been pretty protective over the money, considering they were strapped for cash for the past several years. Another reason was that the family might have not wanted to deposit the money because it would affect their welfare benefits. But authorities couldn't say for sure, which I think is definitely a good thing to bring up, because I don't know exactly how all that works, but I would assume eventually their benefits could have been affected if they had that kind of money.
And cash is the best way to
avoid detection. Yeah, keep it out of the banks.
Mm-hmm.
police later found an 11-page letter left inside the truck, and it was written by Sherilyn to Bobby. And this is, I don't know, very telling if you ask me. In it, she expressed how she didn't think he loved her anymore, that she was resentful at him for being a, quote, hermit, and hinted at her desire for a divorce. She also wrote, quote, I would not wish for my daughter to be raised in foster care because of you being in prison for attempted murder and her mother dead. Which is just like, whoa. That's pretty serious.
Yeah.
And obviously investigators are like, this doesn't prove anything about the disappearance, but I think it's something you got to take very seriously. I mean, especially considering the circumstances later on. But Sherilyn's friends would also later come forward and explain that writing angry letters was a form of therapy to Sherilyn and that no one was ever supposed to read them. Which I'm like, okay, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Also, I don't know, we do know she's bipolar, and if you're in, when you're manic or when you're severely depressed, I can see how you can write something that you didn't truly mean. It was just a thought that crossed your mind and you need to get it off your chest or something. But
I feel like these are a smidge more than an angry.
Yeah, still pretty concerning. Yep.
But nearly everything left behind inside the truck suggested that the Jamisons intended to come back, right? Except for one glaring detail. Their dog, Maisie. Why would they deliberately leave her behind, even for a short walk? Because obviously dogs are great hiking buddies. If that's what they were going to do, maybe they were going to go walk somewhere to a viewpoint and take a look at the property from, higher elevation or something like that. Why not just bring the dog with you?
Exactly.
I mean, you brought her all this way. Dog's probably got to go to the bathroom, so why not at least get her out? But no, she's left behind in the locked vehicle. So this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's also worth noting that the truck itself was in pristine condition. There were no signs of mechanical troubles or a forced breakdown. And if someone ransacked the inside, they would have taken the bag of cash, wallet, and cell phones, and probably would have let the dog out, right?
Yeah.
If it's some random person, I have a hard time imagining they'd be willing to break into the car with a dog in it. You know what I mean? Again,
Maisie might
be
a little Shih Tzu or something.
A very friendly dog.
Yeah.
Or Shih Tzu, exactly.
Yeah.
Whatever, not going to scare me. Investigators made an informed guess that the family intended on returning to the vehicle. So they got together, regrouped, and tried to put together some sort of timeline of events. And after some digging, they found out that the Jamisons first left their home on October 7th, 2009. They had been seen by a local that helped give them directions, which was odd since Bobby had both his cell phone and GPS with him. The person said the family was in good spirits despite being lost, and everything about them seemed completely normal. They also expressed that they were excited to be moving out there and asked a lot of questions, including, quote, is it hard to build out there? And what are some issues that we might run into? Which these seems like very reasonable questions to ask, especially if you're thinking about buying property out in an area like this. So I can see why that, witness would just be like, yeah, it seemed totally normal. And it's possibly the GPS. And this kind of goes back to my comment earlier about why didn't they bring the GPS with them if they were just going out? Maybe he didn't have the maps downloaded for this area. Right. So his directions only got him so far. And then he had no idea where he was going after that, possibly. Eventually, the witness said they were able to pinpoint the location on his GPS, and the family went on their way. So they got help from the local to figure out where they were going from there. Instead, though, they turned around and went home, intending to head back to the property the next day. On October 8th, the family headed out to the property again, but this time with specific GPS coordinates of the property. This would also be the day they met up with their real estate agent before taking off. Their GPS records later revealed that they had actually driven higher up the mountain earlier that day, and from there it shows that they took about a 20-minute walk up a plateau before heading back to the truck and eventually the property. From there, the data from the GPS suddenly ended, and at this point, police are left with more questions than answers. I mean, how confusing. Just putting this timeline together has got to be so confusing.
Yeah, it's like they go out there, they're like, we're lost, what's going on, asking questions about building the property. They go home. Then they pack up all their shit, then they go out there. Then they go further than the property. They do go on a hike. They do come back to the car. Then they're coming back, and then all of a sudden, their truck just stops and
right. They just stop at this one point and they disappear. Makes no sense.
Makes no sense. So on Bobby's phone, they actually found a few pictures of Madison that were taken the day the Jamisons went missing. And in their effort to put the pieces together, police investigated the GPS location higher up the mountain where they went walking before heading over to the property. And this is interesting. If you want to take a look at this last picture, you could just Google it if you're listening. But last picture taken of Madison on her dad, Bobby's cell phone. This will become an iconic image because they think, people read a lot into her expression on her face and her crossed arms. And they're like, was she uncomfortable? Is she happy? Is it just an awkward picture? Is she seeing something that makes her uncomfortable? People kind of dive into this. I think it's a little bit of a Rorschach test because
Agreed.
I don't think it really reveals much.
It's a kid being a kid.
Yeah.
Try taking pictures of your kid, man.
They just look weird.
It's such a struggle.
Yeah.
Like they don't like a lot of kids don't like taking pictures, and so they'll be like, no.
Yeah.
Or they'll just be looking away or could look mad. I mean,
Yep.
so many pictures that we've tried taking of our daughter are just like her looking pissed or
Yes,
looking away. And I can just see Madison crossing her arms and be like, no, I'm not going to do that. Or
100%.
So I don't see why people are reading into this too much.
No,
You can see her two front teeth missing.
Yeah, true. That was from the swing. Yeah. I think it's similar to the surveillance footage of them loading the car where people are just trying to read way too much into it when it's possibly just a normal reaction and normal activity.
So I will say one other thing that kind of sticks out to me is that she's not wearing a jacket.
True. Yeah.
So
she might just be cold.
Could just be cold. Yeah, exactly. But I think that speaks to it wasn't cold enough that they thought they needed to bring jackets or wear jackets outside at this point, which would make sense for why the jackets were found inside the vehicle.
Yep. And it's like, it's just a short hike, 20 minutes.
Right.
So we'll be back to the car soon.
And the sun's still out. So
yeah,
it couldn't have been that cold if they weren't wearing any jackets, but who knows?
Yeah. So when the police arrived to this GPS location where the Jamisons might have gone on a little hike, they found 3 sets of shoe prints that surprisingly didn't get washed away by the rain, which is surprising because remember that there was a huge storm. That plays a lot into the evidence they can find here. One of the prints was clearly a child they estimated to be about the age of 6. They were also able to track where the family had been walking along the plateau and found the exact rock where the photos of Madison were taken. However, there's a lot of speculation surrounding these photos, and this is kind of what we were talking about. Some of her friends and family believe she might have looked distraught or upset, but who really knows? The next day, they put together a search party with 12 dog teams, including cadaver and air scent dogs, helicopters, a drone, ATVs, horses, mules, and several media crews. It would end up being one of the largest searches ever done in Oklahoma's history.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's extensive searching.
Yep. And during the searches, the cadaver dog teams repeatedly found scent near a nearby water tower. It was drained. They drained the whole damn thing, but no evidence concerning the missing family could be found. The search attracted the attention of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who reprinted posters of the family. In this case, soon got national attention. But unfortunately, because of the dense canopy along the mountains, search and rescue wasn't able to see much from the sky, and that just made their job incredibly hard. The ground was covered in thick shrubs and dense trees, and there were a lot of steep cliffs and random drop-offs that also slowed down the search crew on the ground. After a few days, they decided to call off the search due to the rugged terrain and tried to figure out a way to establish a more targeted search area. And the community ended up coming together and establishing their own search, which included people that were familiar with the local terrain. So as the public, police, and FBI even continued their search, investigators looked deep into the belongings left behind in the family's truck. They figured there must have been something they missed.
Must be missing something.
Yeah, but nothing really stuck out. So moving forward, they started an interview process. And according to the extended family, it was pretty normal for the Jamisons just to up and leave for a few days or even weeks at a time without telling anyone, which is probably why they weren't reported missing by their family, because it was just like, oh, yeah.
They do this all the time.
Yeah.
So.
And they weren't on good terms with Bobby Dean and Starr. So Unfortunately, that left a lot of time for the weather, animals, or possible perpetrators to destroy any evidence left behind. Latimer County Sheriff Israel Beauchamp offered theories including that they may have encountered someone familiar, possibly Bobby's father, which could have led them to pull over. What authorities didn't know is whether or not they left the area willingly or by force. Still, the witnesses' account in the area contradict one another. Some claim to have seen fresh tire tracks, suggesting they left in another vehicle, while others swore there was no additional traffic or unknown cars driving around the area that day. They said the last person to see the family alive was a man who lived about a quarter of a mile down the same dirt road their car was found on. He remembers seeing the Jamisons drive up the road that morning, but no one came up or back down that day. It was also possible he happened to miss someone else going up that road. What is he constantly watching the road all day? I know it's out there. People do to pay attention to roads going by.
I think, all the windows in a house. You usually can see around for quite a ways. So to me, that seems very plausible. He
could have, yeah.
But yeah, he could have been in the bathroom and a car rolled up and he missed it. Or
did he have nothing to do the rest of the day besides just hang out?
There's some people that do that. They just sit on the front porch or just look out the window all day.
True.
So maybe, but
that's a good point. But many people who live in remote areas, they are on alert for visitors, and cars can be heard approaching on a dirt road from pretty far away.
That's a good point.
It's noisy as hell. So.
And dust getting kicked up. You can see that from quite a ways away. So you can tell if there's a vehicle on a dirt road.
Yeah.
Unless there was rain, and so there's no dust because the road's not dry. Right. So that's a possibility as well. But again, if the road was wet, then there'd be tire tracks and there would have been more evidence of a vehicle, I think. But
yeah.
A big thank you to Stamps.com for sponsoring today's episode. I love Stamps.com. Been using them for, probably 5-6 years now, and they have changed the way that I do all my mailing and shipping. I've used it for Higher Love Wellness. I've used it for our merch stores, and it has saved me thousands of dollars, not to mention all the just time it takes to take all your packages to the post office and pay for all of the postage there. Plus you pay way too much. With Stamps.com, you get discounts you can't find anywhere else. We're talking up to 89% off USPS and UPS. Best of all, you can do it 24/7. You don't have to operate within the hours of the post office. All you need is a computer and a printer. And guess what? Stamps.com, if you use our code, will send you a free digital scale. So you have everything you need to start printing postage today. Stamps.com also seamlessly integrates with every major marketplace and shopping cart. If you sell online, you can access the USPS and UPS mailing services you need to run your business right from your computer or phone anytime, any day or night. No traffic, no waiting in line. They even show you your cheapest and fastest shipping options from different carriers. You can easily schedule a package pickup right from the Stamps.com dashboard. So put more life into your work-life balance with Stamps.com. Sign up with promo code LIGHTSOUT for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and that free digital scale. There's no long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the page, and enter code LIGHTSOUT.
It's also possible the witness was lying, and he was a possible suspect.
True.
Considering he was familiar with the area too, but without any evidence, this was just a theory. But FBI investigators questioned several family members, close friends, and the last person to see the Jamisons alive, but came up with nothing. Years passed with no answers, and the family grew frustrated, but, they still remained hopeful that the Jamisons were still alive. Here's actually a news report about a year after the disappearance.
The Jamisons' loved ones spent the sad anniversary here at the family's lakeside home in Eufaula. A year after their disappearance, the family's whereabouts are still a total mystery.
I think right now it's so hard because I don't know. I don't know what happened.
It's been a year since Star Jamison's son Bobby, his wife Sherilyn, and their 6-year-old daughter Madison vanished. A witness saw them on October 8, 2009. as they were exploring some land they were looking at buying in the Panola Mountains near Red Oak. 11 days later, their truck was found abandoned on that same land. Their IDs, cell phones, cash, and their family dog were still locked inside. A search of the area came up empty.
They don't deserve to be forgotten.
Nikki Chenault is Sherilyn's best friend. She says false rumors of the couple's involvement in witchcraft and drugs have hindered the family's search for real answers.
A lot of people are judging because they don't know them, and I knew them. I knew Sherilyn for 11 years. I've known Bobby for the last 7 years. The kindest, most gentle man I've ever met. It's really hard because, I know my son would protect his wife and my grandbaby, but, I just grieve because I don't know. I don't know what's happened.
During a vigil at the Jamisons' home, their loved ones released 3 colors of balloons, each representing a member of a family who remains lost.
We love you, Bobby. We love you, Sherilyn. And we love you, Madison. We'll always love you, and our prayers are with you.
Then in 2013, about 4 years after the family's disappearance, a grim discovery unfolded just 2.7 miles as the crow flies, but about 7 miles on foot from where the Jamisons' truck was discovered. It was a smokestack hollow area of Panola Mountain. A few local deer hunters had stumbled upon what they feared were human remains. When questioned why the initial searches hadn't found anything, an assistant special agent of the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation told reporters that, quote, falling leaves potentially obscured the bodies. Which I can understand the frustration because this was a massive search.
Yeah.
And to not find them and have some hunters stumble upon human remains is got to be frustrating.
Yeah. I don't know. As much pressure as you can put on local law enforcement, I do think it's also like finding a needle in a haystack out there.
Well, and who's to say the remains were there when they were searching in the first place?
Also a great point. Yeah.
So that could have been why they didn't find anything, because they weren't dead yet.
Yeah.
So. But here's another news report, actually with Bobby's mother, Star, and she's being interviewed after the remains were found. Let's take a look at this.
It's been so hard being able to sleep at night.
For the last 4 years, Starlet Jamison has worried and wondered.
Bobby was one of these people that was always helping people.
Her son Bobby Jamison has been missing, along with his wife Sherilyn and their 6-year-old daughter, Madison.
She was always, get into something, then she'd look at you with her big brown eyes.
8 days after they were reported missing, the family's truck was found in the mountains. Maisie, then just a puppy, was inside, barely alive. The remains discovered by hunters this weekend were less than 3 miles away. Around the same time the remains were found, Bobby Jamison's mom says she prayed for a miracle.
I think that God knew that I needed something.
Though there is no official confirmation, the remains are the Jamison family.
There's just partial skeletal remains and some clothing like shoes, things like that.
This mom believes God has answered her prayer, revealing the remains of their bodies, but she believes their souls left long ago.
And I know that they're with God now, and they're in a better place.
A lot of information could be gleaned from that clip. There's definitely some good aerial footage of the terrain. I mean, this is a very, very difficult terrain area. I mean, very rocky. There's no like paths, it looks like, out there. It looks like it's just a bunch of open land.
That was the difficulty with the initial search too. It's like, this is too much jagged terrain. We can't see anything from above
because of trees,
and we can't even walk around on ground.
Well, it makes sense why they got the mules out, and they had to get off-road vehicles out there. But even then, I mean, it's like you said, finding a needle in a haystack. So the remains are skeletal. A few clothing items, which I assume is why, before being able to confirm that it's them, they were like, it's them.
Because nobody else
missing. And nobody else has gone missing, which I think is also interesting to note, that this seems kind of like an anomaly for this area. So definitely something to keep in mind. But their suspicions would later be confirmed by authorities who secured the scene and sent those partial skeletal remains to the medical examiner to be tested and analyzed. Reports described that the bodies were lying face down in the dirt, lined up side by side. This unusual positioning fueled the foul play theory and suggested that someone deliberately arranged the bodies at the scene. Some suggest that laying the bodies face down showed a sign of a killer's remorse. Shoes that apparently belonged to the couple and child were recovered, like you heard in the report. A dried flower was found with Madison's remains, and with Bobby's remains, a fragment of a flexible material with a cloth material on one side was also found. So not exactly sure what that is exactly, but something that was noted. The DNA identification process was agonizingly slow, especially in this time. It took them 8 months for the medical examiner to confirm that the remains did in fact belong to the Jamison family. And unfortunately, the advanced decomposition made it hard to determine a cause of death or provide any other forensic evidence aside from DNA. In the end, the medical examiner's office was unable to determine the cause and manner of death for all of the Jamison family members. Medical examiner Dr. Joshua Lanter's opinion states that in all 3 cases, there is no perimortem trauma or trauma at or near the time of death was detected. But he did write, quote, "Due to the absence of skin, soft tissue, internal organs, and the remaining skeleton, perimortem trauma and or natural disease cannot be excluded." The report also noted carnivore and rodent damage to the bones. And during the examination, a hole was found in Bobby's skull. The hunters who discovered the bodies feared that this hole had been a gunshot wound. The autopsy report later suggested it was caused by animal predation. FBI and local authorities spent months chasing leads and questioning potential suspects, but came up with nothing. They also discovered Bobby's cell phone was used 3 days after they went missing, which adds yet another layer of complexity to this already confusing case.
Good Lord.
Sheriff Beauchamp summed it up saying, quote, "A lot of investigators would love to have as many leads as we do. The problem is they point in so many different directions."
Yep.
Ultimately, police would come forward and announce what they officially believed happened to the Jamisons. Sheriff Israel Beauchamp said, quote, "I believe they were forced to stop and got out of the truck to meet someone they recognized, and I think that either they left willingly or by force. It appeared the family didn't intend to be away from their truck for long because they had left everything behind, including their dog. The family stated that Maisie was Madison's best friend and she went everywhere with her, and they insisted she would have left her dog behind in any circumstance," which the more I think about that, the more it seems very plausible that they were forced to leave the vehicle.
Yeah, by gunpoint
by somebody,
or threat. Yeah.
Right. And it would, because that would make sense for why the dog would be left behind. Police revealed it appeared someone used Bobby's cell phone after the family went missing and then returned to the truck before locking it. Authorities also suggested that someone could have driven up this one-way dirt road behind them and blocked them in. That said, they still consider weather and wild animals as also possibilities here, but this left the investigation at a permanent standstill unless more evidence was uncovered.
And we will dive into what the phone activity was in a little bit.
Because that's like
here.
my big question is, what's the activity exactly?
Yeah.
Like, is it just a cell phone pinging a tower?
Right.
Because that may or may, could have just happened from the phone sitting there with no one touching it. But
yeah,
it becomes very obvious somebody had to have touched the cell phone.
Yes. And we will dive into that. So, good Lord. We are in a deep hole here. And this leaves us with a bunch of theories. And we're going to get through these theories, and
even then probably not cover all of the theories that are out there, but these are the ones that have the most, I'd say, credibility or circumstantial evidence to back them up. But
yeah, and I love this quote by the former police sheriff Beauchamp. He said, quote, "Normally you can go through an investigation and one by one start to eliminate certain scenarios. We haven't been able to do that in this case. With this family, everything seems possible." And really that sums it up right there. It's just like everything seems possible at some point. So what happened? There are several possibilities, including the paranormal, which we'll dive into. Rumors of demonic forces or malevolent spirits plaguing the family might explain their sudden and tragic demise in the Oklahoma mountains. Or was there foul play involved? Was the family lost and eventually succumbed to the harsh elements? Were they attacked by a wild animal? Maybe they met someone they knew. Maybe they met a stranger with some ill intentions. So law enforcement, they combed through all the details. They searched for any clues that could shed any amount of light on the family's fate. The abandoned truck, Sherilyn's cryptic letters hinting at marital issues, and the infamous last image of Madison. These are all a million pieces of the puzzle that really, in the end, they don't form a whole picture. Plus, when you consider the rugged terrain, the storms that were happening, where the remains were found, added another layer of complexity. And as years passed, obviously not only the storm, but the harsh environment in general likely destroyed crucial evidence. There are also several scenarios that could have played out in the hours leading up to the death of the Jamison family, but without a clear cause of death or any concrete evidence that could explain what happened, all we have left are the theories. So, theory 1, lost in the wilderness.
Which I was going to say, I'm really curious. I know medical examiners, can't give like their personal theory, but I'm really curious what the medical examiner thinks happened. Like if they just had to kind of surmise all of the findings and the circumstances that they were found in, like what they think.
Yeah.
And if I had to take a just shot in the dark, I kind of feel like maybe they think that they were just, lost and succumbed to the elements perhaps, especially since they seem to point towards the hole in Bobby's skull being from predation.
Yeah. Well,
because that's like a hole in the skull from an animal.
Yeah.
What animal is putting a hole in the skull?
I don't know. It could just be scavengers, like after they had already perished, or somebody dumped the bodies. Like these animals came by and attacked the bodies. But yeah, I don't know.
Your skull's still pretty hard.
Yeah.
So what's like, unless like an animal's trying to get to the brain or something, I don't know. Like that's my first thought was gunshot to the head.
To the head.
And I
that's
think
what the hunters thought. Yeah.
Thoughts are
and we will dive into that if it was a gunshot or not. But yeah, this lost in the wilderness theory, I don't know. Honestly, I think this might be a weaker one, but their truck contained coats and warm clothing, money, and their dog Maisie. Since they were heading into the remote mountains in October, where it was around 40 degrees, without maps or GPS, they could have easily gotten lost. The possibility of the family simply wandering off and eventually succumbing to the elements is possible, especially considered they were unfamiliar with this area. The chilly weather, along with their abandoned coats found in the truck, meant they might have just been exposed all night after they gotten lost, and 40 degrees at night meant that, they could have suffered from hypothermia if they couldn't have stayed warm, so that was a risk, especially if they were out there for an extended period without proper clothing. Possibly they could have gotten wet, maybe it was raining, or they were injured. But the theory of the family getting out of the car to walk around and getting lost several miles away doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. If you remember, Bobby was in a car accident in 2003 and he struggled with chronic pain. Sherilyn's good friend Nikki even said, quote, Bobby would get in pain walking around the house, let alone covering that kind of ground. I do not believe they left the truck by choice. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. And even when they did go on that earlier walk, it was like a 20-minute walk. And they were done. So why would they go on like a 7-mile walk?
True.
That's where their bodies were found.
Is it possible Bobby had medication with him, and he took it before they got there earlier that morning?
Yeah, I could.
And maybe
that.
His pain was kind of under control. And
yeah,
I mean, when you're about to make such a big purchase like that and potentially drain all of your finances on a piece of land, I can see why you would want to scout it out and look at it from all the different points of view.
True.
Because here's my thoughts on the lost in the wilderness. Because I think a lot of people would be like, well, they were found face down, side by side, like lined up, right?
That seems suspicious.
Suspicious, right? Could it also have been they were lost, it got dark, and they decided, all right, well, we're completely lost. We're not going to make it back to the car. So we're going to lay down side by side. Perhaps they were huddling together to keep warm. They didn't have coats. So maybe they were laying on the ground and maybe they died during the night or something from the cold or hypothermia or something like that. And ultimately that's why they're found in that position. That could explain that possibly. And then also people are like, well, if they went on a hike, why didn't they bring the dog? Well, as you heard in one of the reports, the dog was a puppy and that terrain is pretty intense. So most people aren't going to necessarily bring a puppy out on that terrain unless you're going to carry the dog the whole way.
To me, why that wouldn't add up is why bring a 6-year-old on like that extensive of a hike too? If he just wanted to scope the terrain, I think you could do that without the whole family. So I don't get that. But also, I mean, if they got lost, like we said, they did have the GPS and everything in their car. And why not bring your phone with you? You know, why intentionally leave all that crap behind in the car? That's why.
Or at least bring a jacket.
Yeah, jacket.
The jacket
right,
is very weird too. Like none of those things crossed their minds before they left for a longer hike.
Yeah, unless if they were like completely ignorant of going out in the wilderness, you know?
Right.
And like we said, it's 2.7 miles as the crow flies, but it was 7 miles on foot. So they were like way out there. So I don't know. I don't buy the lost in the wilderness theory. Mostly because all their stuff was left in the car. I think that's a big indicator. At least at least the GPS.
I don't know though. Like I go back to, there's plenty of examples of people who go for hikes with ill prepared or leave with nothing and then just randomly get lost. I mean, people get lost in the wilderness all the time in these areas. But then again, if that was the case, I go back to how come they weren't located far earlier when all that searching was going on?
Yeah.
Because like they did an exhaustive search of this whole area and again, covered up by leaves. I don't know. Like that seems kind of unlikely that they'd be so covered by leaves that, I mean, they have cadaver dogs out there and stuff. Like, how come they weren't located or their scent wasn't picked up if they were already deceased from the elements and, you know, they're just out there?
Yeah.
That to me is, there's like a timing issue here. I feel like from the time of the search, unless again, there's possibility that the search just missed an area that they happen to be in. But I don't know. That seemed pretty unlikely to me as well. So I think it's possible. I don't think it's the most likely theory.
That's where I'm at. Totally possible, but I'm not buying it, basically.
So let's talk about the next theory here. And this deals with murder and suicide. The extended family was convinced that the true cause of their deaths was murder, but the identity of the culprit, or perhaps culprits, is still up for debate. Some believe Sherilyn had intentions of murder-suicide. I think we just have to bring this up because, again, it is a possibility. I think her family and friends dispute this pretty strongly, so just keep that in mind. But we have to go back to that lengthy letter that was discovered in the truck, right? I mean, to me, that letter could potentially speak to more than just, you know, Sherilyn was just expressing herself or emotions. And this letter was reportedly written by Sherilyn to Bobby, again, hinting at serious marital problems. Some have even referred to it as a hate letter. And again, she called her husband a hermit that didn't love their daughter. Another letter ended up being found in their home discussing death as well. And Sheriff Beauchamp said that the Jamisons seemed to be, quote, obsessed with death. So something to keep in mind. As we mentioned before, according to her friends, Sherilyn's letter writing was a form of therapy that she frequently practiced. And again, she could have just been writing about death because that was just, you know, what was on the mind, what she was dealing with, and not totally, you know, beyond the realm of possibilities. Sherilyn also struggled with bipolar disorder and had a habit of carrying a .22 caliber pistol, which we mentioned earlier, which raised some concerns about her mental state and also provided a potential murder weapon. Given Bobby's size, 6'3", approximately 170 pounds, compared to Sherilyn's size of her height being 5'7", her weight being around 105 pounds, overpowering him with her bare hands seemed unlikely, so a .22 caliber pistol, the type Sherilyn reportedly carried, could have been used. But then, where is the pistol, right?
Yeah, this is huge.
Her pistol was never found and seemed to vanish in thin air. And so if it was a murder-suicide, you would expect to find the weapon dropped next to their bodies.
Yeah.
Potentially.
And I don't know. Animals aren't coming by and picking up a .22 pistol.
No.
Someone could have walked by, saw the bodies, didn't report it, snagged the pistol for themselves. That's a possibility. But
or like I mentioned earlier, is it possible that if Sherilyn did, which again, by all accounts of the family, she loved Madison. She would never hurt her. So I just want to reiterate that because I don't believe this, but just this was a thought that I had. Potentially, did Sherilyn kill both of them, then discarded the pistol or buried it or something like that, hid it somewhere, and then used another means to kill herself?
Possible.
A possibility. Again, no evidence backing that up.
Yeah.
Just want to say that. Again, going back to the autopsy report, it doesn't specifically mention gunshot wounds. There was only a small hole in Bobby's skull, which the medical examiner said was possibly caused by animal predation, and there was no bullet fragments found inside the skull cavity or near the remains. Sherilyn's mother, Connie, has repeatedly stated that Bobby and Sherilyn were good parents. She said, quote, "Like I've said from the very beginning, I think somebody killed them. There's just no way that Bobby and Sherilyn would ever let anything happen to Madison unless something had been done to them." So definitely, don't know these people. So I really take the family's opinions seriously, especially when it comes to these unsolved cases, because they know them better than anybody else.
Yeah.
And if they strongly feel that way, I think you have to take that into consideration for sure.
Agreed.
Also, according to the medical examiner, there was no exit wounds or gunshot residue found on Sherilyn or Madison. That, along with no weapon being discovered, raises some serious doubts and questions about the murder-suicide theory. Again, we're talking partial skeletal remains, so it's possible that some of that evidence of exit wounds or gunshot residue would have been gone at that point. So
this is another one where possible, but I don't buy it.
Yeah, this one,
I know she was disturbed, but I think the biggest point of her loving her daughter at the end of the day, I think really goes to show that this really wouldn't have happened. Which brings us to theory number 3. Did Bobby Dean, Bobby's father, kill them? This is another one I don't fully buy, but this is another theory. Could they have been victims of 67-year-old Bobby Dean? Some think that because he was ill at the time of the incident and Bobby was his own flesh and blood, he didn't kill them. But it was already suggested he was violent when he had allegedly attempted to run over Bobby with his car a few years earlier. According to Bobby, his father had threatened to kill him and his family on 2 separate occasions in November 2008 and April 2009, as we mentioned before. In Bobby's petition for a protective order against his father, he didn't go into detail about the threats, but he did write that Bobby Dean was a, quote, very dangerous man who thinks he is above the law, and that he'd been involved with, quote, prostitutes, gangs, and meth. He also wrote, quote, my entire family is severely scared for their lives. I am in fear at all times. But like we mentioned earlier, a judge dismissed the protective order on May 18th, 2009.
Which do you think perhaps that was because there's not enough evidence to support these claims?
I do, and I also think that, they did file a lawsuit against them over the sale of the gas station, so it seemed like there was just a bunch of inter-family turmoil going on here, and it might have just been a play on that.
Right.
I'm not sure, but it was dismissed. Also, protective orders, I don't know, they're dismissed a lot when they're necessary.
True.
They're put in place when they're not necessary. It's kind of a mess, but it's still unclear also why they had the $32,000 in the car or why they stashed it on the floor of the driver's seat. One possibility is they plan to use it to buy the land, which as I explained earlier, I don't think that's the case. Another is that they were worried Bobby Dean might try to steal it if they left it behind, because this was potentially some of the money from the gas station sale. Or maybe they hesitated to deposit in the bank because they were concerned it would affect their welfare benefits. But, if you think about it, $32,000 to kill somebody, that would be a motive, but it was still in the car. So that clearly wasn't the motive. It was still there. Plus, no one except the realtor, including their family, knew the Jamisons were heading out of town, let alone the remote property where they were headed. If it was Bobby Dean, he would have had to follow them all the way out to where their abandoned truck was found without being spotted. Plus, Bobby's uncle, Jack Jamison, said Bobby's dad was, quote, either in a hospital or rest home at the time of the disappearances. And he also said that he was a disturbed individual, he admitted, but not capable of murder. Some suggest that Bobby Dean could have hired a hitman. I don't know about that.
How often does that happen?
Yeah. And
where it's successful.
More often than not, it's an undercover cop who's about to bust you for trying to hire a hitman.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That's usually when you hear the word hitman.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I think I'd be interested to know more about what is Bobby Dean's connection to gangs.
Right, yeah.
Because is it possible there was he had an affiliate gang member do this for him? But why?
Yeah.
Like what's he getting out of it other than taking out his own flesh and blood? Like he's not getting it. He didn't take any of the belongings. He didn't take the money back or anything. So he's just an evil man. And out of spite, he just decided to off the whole family, including Madison. Like,
yeah, I'm not buying it.
That seems very far-fetched.
That seems crazy. That seems like I don't know. That's some super villain behavior, right?
Yeah.
So I don't buy that. We will get into, there was another briefcase in the car, which we'll get into in a little bit, that was never recovered, but still we don't know what was in that briefcase. So the motive there, I don't know, I'm not buying it. And allegedly there was a bunch of litigation going on between Bobby and his father. So, obviously bad blood was involved. Was that enough motive for him to
murder his
someone?
entire family?
Yeah.
Apparently, I don't know. I can't help but think, is it possible? Sure. And I mean, Bobby Dean did say those quotes about his father being an extremely dangerous man. And so I hate to discount all of that completely. You know what I mean? But again, I think there probably be more evidence. And again, the FBI was looking into this and as we'll talk about later, they end up clearing Bobby Dean himself because he had an alibi. And I would assume they would have looked into every scenario involving Bobby Dean. So yeah, I think there'd be more evidence. But again, I can't help but get those things that Bobby said about his father.
It's definitely something to note and to keep in mind. But if you remember, we talked about the lawsuits before. Bobby and Sherilyn had been described as, quote, scammers by former Sheriff Beauchamp. So, they had previously sued 3 other people in 2005 after a car accident. So they were known to just kind of send us it's the USA, baby. Everyone's suing everyone out here. I don't think that's enough motive here. But
well, I mean, I kind of feel like that's a dig by the sheriff.
Oh, definitely.
You know what I mean? To be like, oh, yeah, they're scammers because dude got injured in a car accident. I mean, you're supposed to call a lawyer when you're injured in a car accident.
Yeah, and it was a chronic pain that he dealt with the rest of his life. So just because
he did that, I mean, and the school thing even didn't seem totally ridiculous to me. I mean, that's your kid. So,
yeah, true.
And I think it's just a sheriff being like, oh, well, they had, looking at their whole background and their financial situation. And I don't know. Still, I think that's a rude thing to say about the family, that they're scammers. I don't think there's enough there to suggest that.
Investigators also looked into the lawsuits and threats between Bobby Dean and Bobby. But yeah, as we were saying, they ruled him out as a suspect, and he would even later pass away in a nursing home about 2 months after their disappearance. He was the age of 67. And he had listed, who of all people, Madison as his sole beneficiary.
Right. So there you go.
It wouldn't make sense. He had cut out Bobby from his will, but then he just moved it to Madison.
So why on earth would he have her murdered?
Yeah. Doesn't make sense.
No.
So yeah, I think this one's pretty debunked, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
there's just not enough there. I can see why. I think it's worth discussing because of the statements that Bobby made about his father.
Definitely.
But again, I don't think there's just no evidence to back it up whatsoever.
Yep.
Which leads us to an even more far-fetched theory here. Let's talk a little bit about Bobby and Sherilyn's interest with the occult and possibly a connection with a religious cult out in this area in Oklahoma. So a popular theory revolves around the discovery of a burnt-out car wreck close to where the family vanished. It had become a target practice for locals, and it was covered with satanic messages similar to the ones found on the Jamison storage container. One of the messages on their container, if you remember, which was graffitied by Sherilyn, read, 3 cats killed to date by people in this area. Witches don't like their black cat killed. She believes someone in the neighborhood had poisoned her cats. So, and that's the thing with Sherilyn. She was definitely witchy.
Yeah.
She's definitely interested in, I mean, she clearly believes in a lot of these ideas and witchcraft and things like that. And Bobby was also dabbling in the occult and Satanism and things like that as well. So they're definitely kind of into that. And it kind of goes back to a lot of the writings about death and just kind of into that stuff. So Connie, and it's interesting because then you hear the family members in the news reports, and they're talking about they're with God now. And, so they have a very religious, I would say Christian point of view on life and belief system. And so Sherilyn and Bobby clearly have a different set of beliefs, as far as we know. But Connie Kokatan, Sherilyn's mother, strongly believed that a religious cult was responsible. She said, quote, "I've always maintained that someone took their lives. Bobby and Sherilyn would never allow harm to come to Madison unless something had happened to them first." She also noted that Sherilyn had developed some odd behavior before her disappearance. She said, quote, "She became very illogical. One day she drove me to Oklahoma City and just dropped me off on the street. She told me, 'Get out of my car.' So I did." Which I'd like to know more context around that.
Yeah.
Because maybe they got in an argument or something or a difference of opinion and she just was like fed up with her and told her to get out of the car versus that being like just a random bizarre thing that happened.
It seems like there's way more to that story.
While Connie was adamant about occult's involvement, she has not pinpointed a specific group, but she alleged that Sherilyn's name appeared on a, quote, hit list maintained by this mysterious cult. Unfortunately, Connie has never named this cult. Which, if that's the case, well, why on earth wouldn't you name this cult? If you think they're responsible, why not get justice for your loved ones?
Out them.
And let's get the FBI raiding that cult's compound.
Yeah. So either she's kind of just spitballing and doesn't even have a name, or she does know a name and for whatever reason, maybe she's scared to release their name because she might be put on a hit list. I don't know.
Or is she trying to kind of explain away Sherilyn and Bobby's beliefs? Because now that's become public. And so maybe she's kind of trying to make it seem like they were like kind of in contact and being influenced by this religious cult.
Yeah.
And maybe she's kind of embarrassed, or she's trying to come up with a reason for why their beliefs are so different from hers. I don't know. Just a thought.
Yeah.
She would also state, quote, "That area of Oklahoma has a reputation for such things, cults and the like, from what I've been told and what I've read." So again, it could have just been a rumor she heard that she's now put out there, and there is no existence whatsoever of this cult.
It does seem a little bit satanic panic-y, like we don't have an explanation. Who is it? It's because of the
satanic cult. Yeah. Or some type of white supremacy group or something is another possibility. After Investigation Discovery aired a special on the Jamison family on the show Disappeared, one of my all-time favorites. It's actually a show I've watched since I was a young teen.
Nice.
Great show. Sherilyn's close friend Nikki Chenauld says she received a phone call from an anonymous woman, and this woman apparently told Nikki she'd once been in a white supremacy group. They'd kept a book containing a list of people who'd been problems for them. Sometimes a woman claimed if she ever remembered one of the names she had seen, she'd search it on the internet. This has led her to multiple missing persons cases, including Sherilyn and Bobby Jamison. Nikki says she wasn't sure what to make of the caller. So,
take it with a grain of salt.
Yep. The family's live-in handyman, Kenneth Bellows, had also been a white supremacist with a criminal record, but he was cleared by the FBI. There had also been rumors of Bobby, like I mentioned, diving into the occult. He had also mentioned, quote, 2 to 4 ghosts on the roof of his home to his pastor, Gary Brandon. Apparently, he also confessed to reading a satanic Bible and asked for special bullets to kill the entities. Apparently, the Jamisons also believed that Madison had been regularly speaking to those entities. Allegedly, a friend of Sherilyn's told the police that she sometimes conducted seances with her, but Sherilyn took them much more seriously than she did. Sherilyn's friend Nikki also said, quote, but in all seriousness, that house was haunted. I don't want to sound crazy, but whenever I went there, I felt a horrible presence. I would leave feeling so down and depressed. It's very interesting, man. Maybe they really did live in a haunted house.
Could have been something going on.
Or was it, the seances and rituals, maybe a few Ouija board sessions or something?
Hey, who knows?
Who knows? Could this occult activity have invited some malevolent spirits in? Were the Jamisons a part of an underground cult that brought questionable people into their lives? Some rumors claimed a witch Bible was found inside their home after their disappearance, but Sherilyn's friend Nikki said she had bought it as a gag gift. Witch Bible?
Yeah, I don't know what that means.
Is that a Wicca book or like what?
I have no idea. Also, I do find it a little suspicious. Nikki 2 times is trying to back away from the witchcraft occult. Like the first time was when she said, we did seances, but she was way into it.
Right.
I wasn't really into it. And then with the whatever this witch Bible is, she's like, no, I bought it for her as a gag gift. It wasn't really.
I wasn't really into it.
Yeah. So interesting. She's trying to back away from it.
I think it's important to remember this is Oklahoma.
Yeah. She's probably scared of getting that stigma attached to her. Yeah.
I feel like the satanic panic's still going on there today.
Yeah, honestly.
So this all makes sense why they'd be trying to retract from being involved in this stuff, because now it's public and, probably embarrassed that other people know, or she's getting shit from people there. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm very interested in knowing the extent of how deep into the occult they really got. And if they're doing seances, like that's pretty
intense. Yeah.
That's a strong believer there that, you believe in the paranormal and, they're trying to contact spirits and things like that. So
asking about specialized bullets to kill ghosts, I think is clearly a sign of something going on.
They've definitely been consuming some material.
Yeah.
According to detectives, no evidence exists that suggests the Jamisons were murdered by a cult. U.S. Marshal named James Webb added, quote, there hasn't been any activity in a couple of years, and many believe that the cult theory drew attention away from more credible theories, which I have to agree with him here. See why some people went that way, and I get it. I get to some people their beliefs seem strange, and maybe they brought this on themselves and stuff. But I mean, come on.
Yeah, possible. Not buying it.
Not buying it.
Also, I mean, the U.S. Marshal, he did. He said there hasn't been activity in a couple of years. But
doesn't mean that
that means there once was.
Totally.
So, it was out there.
Rural area in this country is going to have strange groups.
For sure. Theory number 5, drugs. And, there might be some truth to this one, but let's see. So some speculate that the Jamisons' fate stemmed from drugs. Rumors spread about Bobby and Sherilyn's potential meth use, prompting investigators to explore the possibility, and they did discover an empty prescription pill bottle in the truck belonging to their old live-in handyman, Kenneth. It's unclear what the fill date on that prescription was. It's unclear why it was left there, or if he gave it to them.
Or he could have just been getting a ride in the truck and he had it with him and left it in there on accident.
Exactly. So that doesn't really explain much, but some suggest drug use might also explain the Jamisons' paranoia of ghost activity. I can kind of buy this. It might also explain why they would want to abandon their life and move into a windowless shipping container in the middle of nowhere with no electricity or plumbing. I do want to talk about this. What would make you, besides, let's take out the financial equation, because I think the finances
that seems the most likely reason.
Right. But what else? Like, why would you just be like, screw this, I'm going to the middle of nowhere, no plumbing, no electricity, and we're going to live in a shipping container for a bit with a 6-year-old daughter? That seems a bit extreme.
Seems a bit extreme, but especially now in today's time, not all that uncommon. Like, I actually follow a few accounts on social media of people who've done exactly this. Yeah, it's a tough life to live, but people do it. I mean, people do the off-grid kind of lifestyle.
For sure. And I'm all for that. I'm not against that at all.
Yeah.
But I just think their specific circumstance, something doesn't really make sense here. And was it that they were super paranoid about living in that house because it was haunted? Because maybe there was some drug use or X, Y, and Z reasons that they felt like we just need to get the hell out of here? I don't know. It just doesn't, things aren't adding up with going there.
Like, what's the real reason they would leave a perfectly good home to go do this?
And obviously finances,
Yeah.
But also, I feel like there are other scenarios,
right?
The other routes you can take that doesn't involve a windowless shipping container in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, that's tough living right there.
So when you consider their drug use and the possible paranoia and this ghost activity, if we go back to the surveillance footage captured on that day of their disappearance, this kind of fueled the rumors. The footage that depicted the Jamisons loading their truck in what some described as, quote, a trance-like state, hinting at potential substance abuse. Others claim that this could be a supernatural trance of some kind, or, honestly, moving stuff is just very mundane, so it's easy to zone out. Unfortunately, as we mentioned before, only a few seconds of the footage has been made available. I do want to bring up, this isn't a fully fledged theory, but aliens have also been mentioned in this case. I will put this as more of a footnote.
Damn.
Yeah. And they do say that this trance that they're in, people always harken back to this surveillance footage, trance, and they do say, were they under the influence of some aliens?
Alien serum?
Yeah. And they would later be abducted, and then the aliens would then go place their bodies out in the forest somewhere.
This would be one of the first alien deaths.
Yeah, right?
Reported.
Seriously.
Because I don't think in any alien abduction story we've ever covered has anyone been killed by extraterrestrial. So
they get probed, they get, their seeds harvested or their eggs harvested, and then they're just placed back from whence they came. So that is a theory, though. I just wanted to point that out there, as which is why I get kind of annoyed with this whole trance-like state.
Yeah,
it's like the footage too that people have seen, it's just that like 2 seconds. And I'm like, I'm not buying it. But plus, for going along with this drug theory, the way in which the truck was found suggests it might have pulled over to let another car pass instead of parking for good. So were they forced out and taken away to be killed? When their bodies were discovered, they were lined up neatly, which seems like they might have been killed execution style. This is hinting, maybe is this cartel activity. I don't think there's cartel activity out in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. It's a possibility. Rumors claim that Bobby had recently reported someone in the area for running a meth operation.
Possible too. I mean, definitely meth in these areas. So.
Yeah. Sherilyn's mother, Connie, also said, quote, everyone around here knows there are lots of evil people up in those mountains. It's where outlaws like Jesse James used to hide out. It's so isolated. So, this area was known for producing drugs, especially meth. Could the family have come across a drug operation and been killed because of it? Possibly.
Where's the drug operation?
Yeah, no evidence,
of that. Yeah.
But, let's think about this a little bit more clearly. Would it make sense to bring your 6-year-old daughter to a drug deal of some sort? And would you leave the dog behind?
Hell
that
no.
Doesn't
add up at all.
Sherilyn's mother, Connie, also mentioned that she had lived with Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison for a handful of months prior to their disappearance. And she said if they had been using or selling drugs, especially meth, she probably would have known about it. I think that's fair. I mean, you can hide drugs pretty easily, but
if you're using meth
consistently,
I feel like that's something that somebody would have picked up on.
Definitely.
Most likely.
She did admit that they had been in financial straits, and she does bring up why they had $32,000 in cash with them, because that kind of screams drug deal, right?
But who's dropping 32 grand on drugs?
Right? That's a lot of
Unless they were going to like, they're meeting a supplier that was going to like set them up with an operation. Like we're talking Breaking Bad level operations being set up out here.
And they would use like the shipping container as a meth lab or some crazy shit like that.
No way, dude. Yeah. Not if, especially if you have a kid and by all accounts, they love their kid and, you know, would never subject her to that kind of life. So,
so it's a bit out there. Sherilyn's good friend, Nikki, who was an ex-meth addict, had also come forward and insisted drugs were not involved. She said being an ex-junkie meant she was familiar with the signs of meth addiction and she would have known what to look for. And despite a thorough search, I think really it comes down to this. The police searched the truck and the home. Investigators found no evidence of drug buying, selling, or using, and Sheriff Beauchamp said there was no evidence backing up the theory that the Jamisons used or dealt drugs. Plus, the potential perpetrators leaving behind $32,000 in the truck wouldn't make sense unless if they completely missed it.
Yeah.
If it was like a drug deal going wrong, why would they just leave the cash behind, right?
I mean, through all the investigation, if there's no signs of drugs being involved whatsoever, I think you got to take that pretty seriously.
Definitely.
So that leads us to our last theory that we're going to talk about. Kidnapping. One of the biggest pieces of evidence that suggests foul play was a truck being found locked with Bobby and Sherilyn's phones left inside. On top of that, 4 days after the Jamisons went missing, police believe someone might have used Bobby's cell phone to call his own voicemail on 3 different occasions. It seems unlikely that any of the Jamisons were still alive on that date when their voicemail was called. So who made these calls? Someone might have deleted old voicemails in order to hide evidence, perhaps. It's possible that Maisie, the dog, could have accidentally hit the phone calling the voicemail, but that seems fairly unlikely considering no other buttons were accidentally pushed in the process. That said, the abandoned truck with the valuables like cash, cell phones, and their dog Maisie left behind fueled speculation that they were abducted against their will. They were possibly ambushed and their vehicle was blocked from descending the mountain path. Some have speculated that the residents who lived off the forest roads, which took them up the mountainside, would have had a unique opportunity to isolate them. Some point to the local who last saw the family, but law enforcement officials have never publicly expressed interest in this individual, which is really hard to believe that they would not, unless they have to have evidence to really like investigate this individual. But that's like one of the biggest things for me in this case is ever since covering the David Shearing, Wells Gray Park murders, that case has always like stood out to me because it really makes you think about sometimes the culprit is just hiding in plain sight, like right next to where this all happened. And sometimes I think, as we saw in that case, police are like, it had to have been somebody that left the area or, you know, something like that. So for me, I think it's a very good possibility that it was somebody living in that area that could have been involved in this. I mean, the fact that they never really looked into this individual that they spoke to, because like it kind of almost seems like a horror movie. You know, you like run across the local and then all of a sudden the local ends up being the killer, you know, in most horror movies. And they're like, oh, here's an opportunity to take advantage of this family. But then it's like, why?
Yeah. And the thing is like, there's no evidence, like you were saying. Whereas with the Wells Gray Park murders, they had some bullet shells,
the truck and the camper.
Yeah. And there was word around town. All the rumors were pointing to, you know, one person, but this one, they just had nothing.
So I do think that's interesting and a possibility.
Yeah.
The discovery of their bodies, of course, only intensifies the mystery here. While foul play can't be entirely ruled out, there's some questions that raise enough doubts. The possible perpetrator or perpetrators somehow overlooked $32,000 in cash and left no trace of a struggle, which is hard to imagine in a kidnapping scenario, but it's possible they missed the bag completely or didn't know or believe they had it with them. Or they just never went into the vehicle, maybe. Yeah. And maybe it was the dog that dialed the voicemail, perhaps just trying to I can see a dog trying to like jump up and like maybe, but it's like, where were the phones? And like, that seems pretty unlikely wouldn't the phones be either locked if they're touch or maybe it's a flip phone. I don't know.
And how is it the same exact thing every
3 times? Yeah. So I don't know. When police reviewed the video footage showing the couple loading their cars, they noticed a brown briefcase placed in their truck. What's interesting is that this briefcase was missing when investigators searched the vehicle, which implied someone had taken it. The sheriff at the time, Beauchamp, guessed the briefcase might have contained another large amount of cash. And to add to the kidnapping theory, the family had used their GPS and cell phones when they went for a hike earlier that day, which suggests they likely would have used them again if they weren't in distress. But again, there's no signs of struggle inside or outside of the vehicle, and autopsies revealed there were no signs of any gunshot wounds. So it's like, how did they die then?
Yeah.
If it wasn't gunshot wounds, then what was it? It's also important to mention again that it had rained for days after they went missing, so it seems very likely that a lot of the forensic evidence has been washed away or destroyed by nature.
Yeah. And like if there was maybe a scuffle outside the car or something like that, it might have been washed away
by that point. It's possible they just stumbled across somebody who just wanted to do harm to them. They had no knowledge of the money that they had with them. And if the brown briefcase contained money, it's possible the killer thought that was all the money they had. And in a hurry, they fled. But I'm like, if they brought the briefcase out of the vehicle, to me, that signifies they were going to meet somebody, right? Like, what? I'm not like, were they just going? If it had money in it, maybe, but we don't know what was in the briefcase. That's the biggest question here.
There's also a chance that like whoever did this, let's say it's a kidnapper theory, they went into the car, they opened up that briefcase, they did find like a bunch of cash or something. So they just thought, oh, this is it. I'll take this. Not thinking that maybe there's a second bag in here with cash. Maybe they thought they found the gold. So they just said, screw it. That's it. I got to get the hell out of here. Like maybe that's it.
Yeah. Or when they were attacked or abducted, they were walking with the briefcase, and that's why they took that. And maybe they didn't want to possibly get their DNA or trace evidence inside the vehicle. So that's why they didn't go looking for anything more, possibly. I mean, all of that would signify there's a real predator, somebody who's really thought this through out there, who took advantage of this family. So, oh man. The other interesting thing is that the keys to the truck were never found either.
That's crazy.
So
I think that's a huge...
Where's the rest of their belongings?
What do you mean?
Like the keys, like what they had with them.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? If they clearly left the vehicle, somebody locked the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the remains are found, it's just some clothing items.
Yeah. And no key.
There's no other, like a key's not going to,
again,
could get buried. But I assume they really like searched this area around the human remains. And would have found the keys if it had been on their person at the time. So, but then why would somebody take the keys? If they're not going to take the vehicle either. So that's very strange. And lastly, since Sherilyn's .22 caliber handgun was never recovered, this might mean that someone could have shot and killed the family with that gun and then just took it with them. Because that's like, possible. I think that's a big piece here, is that where is Sherilyn's gun?
Yeah. Because they never found it at home either.
Yeah. So what happened to these items? Could they just been washed away or buried, with the weather changes, or did somebody actually take them from their final resting place? But since the inconclusive autopsy results in 2014, few official updates regarding the Jamison family's fate have come to light. Their story transcended the initial news cycle. Again, we talked about ID Discovery's Disappeared series featured their case in 2010, which sparked further public interest. And social media has given a space for public speculation, with viewers and listeners attempting to reconcile the confusing evidence and propose explanations for the family's tragic end, which is not always helpful.
Yeah.
It can really go sideways and send things in all sorts of directions, and oftentimes in a way that's very offensive to the family.
Yeah, that's why I think the Bobby Dean theory and the Sherilyn murder-suicide theory came to light. It was probably these armchair detectives out there on the internet proposing that, because I'm like, what? There's no evidence that points to them doing this.
And I feel like this case has been pretty extensively investigated by the authorities. I mean, the fact the FBI is involved, I mean, I think that counts for something. Again, in all cases, that doesn't mean good investigative work.
True.
like Denise Huskins, that whole case, the FBI was involved with that, and they really fucked that one up. So I don't want to say that perhaps the authorities missed something. And I think there's differing opinions out there on Sheriff Beauchamp and what they did. But I mean, it does seem like a big search was done, which doesn't always happen in cases like this. So I don't know. I have a feeling that they investigated this pretty thoroughly, or as much as they possibly could, and chased down all the leads they had.
I think with the decomposition of the bodies too, I think that's just like,
that makes it,
if you can't conclude how somebody actually died, I think that just makes a case incredibly difficult.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah. Because I think there's obviously big pieces of evidence missing here and information missing here that we probably will never know.
Yeah.
Because it is gone either by the person that did this to them or the elements destroyed it over time. And without more evidence, sadly, the Jamison family's fate will remain unknown. The harsh reality is those remains are out there for a long period of time, exposed in the wilderness. I mean, countless pieces of evidence were destroyed, and scavengers, are going to destroy whatever's left after that. If the bodies had been found sooner, their deaths might have been solved, and I strongly believe that if they had been located sooner, then we likely would probably have a better idea of what happened to them.
Yeah.
And maybe been able to figure out if they were murdered, how was that done, and then been able to kind of work off of that and figure out. Because I think that's the thing too, is where do authorities go at this point? Like where, unless you just start like randomly making up new theories and talking to possible people. I do go back to the local that they talked to, though. I do think maybe there's something more there that they could have looked at possibly, but I'd like to think that they at least looked at that individual. And
my question is, if there was a local nearby and he did it, why? And he would have the key, essentially, right? Because they couldn't find it anywhere. Why would he leave the truck so close to where it was near his property? Wouldn't he just go like torch the truck?
Yeah,
if it was him.
Yeah, and that, I mean, for that all to play out seems very unlikely and almost like too skilled, you know what I mean? And just like that'd be like a serious like serial killer level precision to pull all that off and avoid detection, and also hide the bodies somewhere they weren't found for years, like after they had been searched. It does make me think that it's possible they were abducted, taken somewhere,
that's
then
why the
killed.
Search couldn't find them.
Right, because I'm like, they were out there searching pretty quickly. So if they were already deceased at that point, either from a murder-suicide situation or exposed to the elements, I feel like they would have found them far sooner.
Yeah.
Because that's usually what happens, especially in cases of murder-suicide. You almost find them immediately, and you find the gun, you find the evidence to support that. But with this, it seems like they weren't even out there when they were searching, and they were potentially somewhere else being held even.
And the scent dogs, they only had that partial hit at the water tower.
Yeah.
And then nothing. You know,
right.
You would think there would be, if there were bodies out there, you would think it would be a bit more. Hounds are really good at finding bodies.
Yeah.
Like if there's a trail of that.
And they were out there pretty quick too. So the scent should have been pretty strong still at that point, especially being able to take them to the vehicle, get clothing items out of the vehicle to let the dogs sniff before they go off. Like that's a really good scenario. And yet it went nowhere.
Nothing.
So it makes me think, were they even out there? And if not, where were they?
Yeah.
And who's all out there? And that's what I go back to, is like, where else could they have been? If somebody had come up again, if it had been a hitman or somebody, and they had noticed they had the briefcase and that's why they murdered them, they wanted the money or something like that, I feel like they would have found them much, much sooner. But it seems like they weren't out there possibly.
Yeah.
But then again, maybe they just missed a spot.
Right.
Oh, that's the hard thing.
I know, with the search. It's
just
a big
tough.
area. Yeah. If I had to guess, though, I think I'd go with it. They were murdered. It was either someone they did or didn't know. It was not one of their own family members. And I think they were potentially kidnapped for some time before they were murdered, or they were murdered just somewhere else and then dumped out there. That's my guess. I'm going with that one.
Yeah. Yeah, this one's tough. I think that the murder theory seems the most plausible for sure. I mean, based on all the evidence. And I think for me, the strongest piece to that is like perhaps the phone being used 3 times
for voicemail. I think
that seems pretty suspicious.
Yeah.
But if I were to discount that and just chalk that up to maybe the dog pressing buttons, which again, I'm not saying I think is what happened, I kind of lean towards the wilderness theory some.
Getting lost.
Yeah, possibly. Just because if you look at statistics around that, like that's a pretty, especially for all 3 being deceased, I think that seems possible. I'd be interested to look at what were the weather patterns that day, and like what was the weather on that exact time frame they left, and was there a storm that hit? Could they have gotten turned around because of the storm, or were they trying to seek shelter? You know what I mean? Like I'd need more information to like really go in on that one. But again, I think the majority of the evidence points towards murder, and it seems like that's what the family believes as well. And of course, they probably have even more information than we do. So I think that seems to be most likely.
Yep. I think we're on the same page.
So with that being said, there's still so many questions to what happened to the Jamison family that remain unanswered, and still an active investigation, still an active case. And if you have any tips or information regarding this case, you can contact the Latimer County Sheriff's Department at 918-465-4012. Because ultimately their family's still looking for answers. And there's people out there that love and miss them. And I can't even imagine how horrible it must be to live with this, this conclusion and not knowing what happened exactly to your loved ones. So
it's heartbreaking.
But we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's episode there. Of course, we want to know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. If you're watching on YouTube, we'd love if you hit that subscribe button while you're there. We'd really appreciate it. Or if you're listening or watching elsewhere on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you're following or subscribed there as well. We'd really appreciate it. But that is going to be it for us today. We appreciate you for joining us, and we'll be back with another one next week. Until then, lights out, everybody.